September 1705, Morocco. A man is about to be sawed in half, alive, in front of 4,000 people. But here's the thing that makes this different from every other brutal execution in history. They're not starting at the head, they're starting at the groin. And by the time you understand why, you'll wish you didn't. The crime. His name was Melik. He wasn't just anyone. He was an alcalde, a local governor. Rich, powerful, connected. But in September 1705, none of that mattered anymore, because Melik had made one fatal mistake. He backed the wrong side in a rebellion. Not just any rebellion, a rebellion led by the Sultan's own son. Prince Moulay Muhammad wanted his father's throne, and Melik thought the prince would win. He was wrong. During the chaos, Melik took it one step further. He personally ordered the execution of Bukasra, the Sultan's cousin. When Sultan Moulay Ismail found out, he didn't just want Melik dead. He wanted Melik destroyed in a way that would echo through history, in a way that would make every other governor in Morocco think twice before even dreaming of betrayal. The Sultan took his time. Weeks passed. Melik sat in his cell, knowing death was coming, but not knowing how. Then, in October, the Sultan had an idea. He called for his royal carpenter, and he asked a simple question. "Do you have a saw strong enough to cut a man in half?" The carpenter said, yes. The method was chosen. The gathering. Word spread fast. By the day of the execution, 4,000 people had gathered in the marketplace. This wasn't a crowd of strangers. Many of them knew Melik personally. Some had worked for him. Some had supported the rebellion. Some were family. They weren't here because they wanted to be. They were here because the Sultan wanted them to see. This was a message. When Melik was brought out, he was tied to the back of a mule. The crowd erupted, screaming, crying. People scratching their own faces in despair. But Melik was calm. Witnesses say he was smoking his pipe, casually, like he was taking an afternoon stroll. Maybe he thought the Sultan would show mercy at the last moment. Maybe he'd accepted his fate. Or maybe he just didn't know what was about to happen. The setup. They brought him to the center of the square. A wooden plank had been prepared. Arms spread wide, legs spread wide, strapped down tight. The plank was placed on a special bench, and then they showed him the tools. A large carpenter's saw, the kind you'd use to cut through thick wood. Two men would pull it back and forth, slowly, deliberately. When the teeth touched his scalp, Melik's calm shattered instantly. He screamed. He begged. The teeth caught in his hair first, ripping it out in clumps. Then the scalp, then bone, but then something unexpected happened. The saw stopped. The executioners stepped back. A discussion broke out. For a moment, the crowd thought the Sultan had changed his mind. Melik thought he might be spared. But it wasn't mercy. It was something far worse. The twist. The Sultan was talking to Bukasra's sons, the men whose father Melik had killed, and they were angry. "Starting from the head is too quick," they said. "He'll die in minutes. That's not justice." They wanted him to suffer. Really? Suffer. So they made a request. Start from the bottom, between the legs. The Sultan agreed. The executioners flipped the plank. Melik was now upside down, head pointing toward the ground, legs spread wide in the air, and the saw was repositioned. Right at the groin. The crowd went silent. Even the ones who hated Melik couldn't watch. This wasn't just execution. This was something else entirely. The executioners looked at the Sultan. He nodded. They began. The execution. Two men, one on each side. Pull, push, pull, push. The saw bit into flesh. The screams weren't human anymore. They were something primal, something you'd hear in your nightmares. The teeth tore through the most sensitive tissue first, then muscle, then fat, then bone. There's a sound when a saw cuts through human bone. It's almost identical to cutting wood. A dry, grinding crack. That sound echoed across the marketplace. Pieces of flesh fell away. Blood sprayed with each stroke. When the saw reached the pelvis, it followed the spine upward, severing nerves, destroying organs, creating a pain beyond human comprehension. When they reached his abdomen, his intestines spilled out, hanging, still warm. His face was covered in his own blood and viscera. Death should have come by now. But it didn't. Because here's the thing about sawing someone from the groin up. The heart and lungs are the last things to be damaged. Blood flows downward when you're upside down, to the brain, keeping you conscious, keeping you alive, far longer than you should be. When the saw reached his navel, they stopped. Not because he was dead, because the Sultan ordered them to. They left him hanging there, still breathing, still aware. Witnesses say Melik asked for water. They refused. After what felt like an eternity, the saw was repositioned, this time under his head, cutting from the other direction to meet the first incision. A few more strokes, and finally, mercifully, Melik died. But the day was far from over. The aftermath. 300 other conspirators were impaled, alive. Wooden stakes driven through their bodies, left to die in the sun over the course of days. 20 more were given to the saw, losing arms, losing legs. The message was clear. Betray the Sultan, and you don't just die, you're erased. Destroyed so completely that your death becomes a story people tell for centuries. A warning. A nightmare. A lesson written in blood. But here's what makes this even darker. This wasn't some medieval innovation. The saw as a method of execution is ancient. In Rome, Emperor Caligula allegedly had people sawed during dinner parties. For entertainment, in Imperial China, they used saws horizontally across the torso, a slower, more methodical death. Christian martyrs were sawed in half. The Apostle Simon the Zealot, Isaiah the prophet. According to tradition, even in the 19th century, during the Hungarian Revolution, thousands of civilians were executed by saw. The truth? This method probably appeared about 5 minutes after the saw was invented, because humans have always had a talent for turning tools into weapons, and weapons into nightmares. The lesson. Today, the saw is used to build, to create, to construct the world we live in. But in 1705 Morocco, it was used to send a message about power, about control, about what happens when you threaten someone who has absolute authority over life and death. Melik's execution wasn't just about punishing one man. It was about traumatizing thousands, so they'd never forget. So they'd never dare. And 300 years later, we're still talking about it, still horrified by it, still trying to understand how humans can do this to each other. Maybe that's the real lesson. Not that brutality works as a deterrent, but that it creates a legacy of horror that outlives everyone involved. The Sultan is dead. Melik is dead. Bukasra is dead. But the story? The story lives forever. So here's my question for you. If you had the power to punish someone who betrayed you, would you want them to suffer? Or would you want them to simply cease to exist? Think about that, because the answer says more about you than it does about them.